You are watching T Radio V, radio in TV.
The Social Action Media Network and T Radio V present Creating Good Work Live with your hosts, Ron Schultz and Greg Franks.
Well, welcome to Creating Good Work Live, where we are dedicated to bringing you the finest in social innovators, social entrepreneurs, hard at work to solve many of the most pressing social issues we're facing. I'm Ron Schultz.
And I'm Greg Franks.
And we're glad you could be with us today because we're changing our format a little bit to focus on more in depth on the issue of intentional civility. A cornerstone of the Tom and Ethel Bradley Foundation, of which my co-host here, Greg Franks, is the president and CEO. And we felt having this discussion was critical in light of the recent and unfortunate ongoing violent events in our communities. Not just as a means to add more talk to this situation, but to offer practical and applicable approaches to taking positive action. So let's get to it. Our first two guests are not new to these issues. Over the past 4 decades, Dr. Lewis King has been involved in a level of scholarly work that is focused on developing change models for the emancipation and development of historically marginalized people and communities. These efforts have centered on liberation consciousness and the practice of humans struggling to overcome structures and relationships of oppression. He is currently a visiting professor at Cal State Northridge and senior scholar at the Tom and Ethel Bradley Foundation. And for 22 years, he has been a professor of human behavior at UCLA and now the Dean Emeritus of the UCLA Drew Medical School. Welcome, Dr. King.
Thank you so much.
Our other guest today is Daniel Tabor, and who has had a long and distinguished career of public service and private service, including being re-elected to the Inglewood City Council and also elected as mayor of Inglewood in what year was that? 2010. And after leaving office, Danny reopened his community development consulting business, Higher Ground, helping small businesses, labor unions, nonprofits, and corporations achieve community impact. 2 years ago, Danny began a new chapter in his life, taking the helm of the foundation of Los Angeles Southwest College as its executive director, always a thankless job. And is now moving into new directions as well. So, gentlemen, I'd really like to welcome you today to Creating Good Work, and let's just dive into this whole topic if we can. So, Dr. King, let's begin with you. Let's begin with the definition of intentional civility and how this directly applies to the current situations of these race-based shootings.
Well, thank you, Ron. Some years ago, I worked as a visiting professor at Morehouse College in Atlanta in helping to develop a leadership center called the Ethical Leadership Center. And it dawned upon me then that one of the issues that befuddle us and confuse us in Western society is this dominance of materialism. And I set about to try to clarify some issues, particularly in the minds of youngsters, that solutions to our problems in all society cannot emerge from a pursuit exclusively of materialism. What was needed was a countervailing force where the ontological premise, the reality, was not material but ethical. So I with this basis of thought, I set about to create something that can be teachable to anyone at any age. And it is now called intentional critical civility. And each word has a particular meaning. The intentional phrase there means that it cannot be left to chance. It has to be embedded in the very life of every child in society. So schooling and parenting being the two major institutions where that should happen. Critical because we have to overcome the westernized version or the Western European version of civility, which had to do with politeness. This goes way beyond politeness to dealing with core issues of how we work with each other. And civility has to take on a new meaning of how it is we create and construct new institutions, new relationships. And it has, just to be brief about the summary, it has 5 central principles, and I'll quickly go over them, and the key words. The first principle has to do with, the dialogue or the conversations are no longer dialogues today. They're monologues. People are shouting and not even shouting at each other. We have to recreate relationships, and the fundamental issue behind relationship is empathy. I'll just stay there for a moment. The second principle has to do with an embedded ethics. We must become ethically identified. We cannot have, I want to be a basketball player, I want to be a football player, I want to be a singer, I want to be, no, we have to be an ethical singer, an ethical basketball player. We have to embed in the identity frame ethics. And what's central to that is the whole issue of learning a set of values that inform what that ethical is, truth and justice and so forth. The third principle focuses on the issue of we live in a social space that we must master and become familiar with at all levels, and it is called a sense of self-sufficiency. And the self-sufficiency must always be reflective. So reflection is the basis of that self-sufficiency. Yes, I know you can build a rocket. I know you need critical thinking, but you must do that from the vantage point of reflecting on the other. The fourth principle is really the core of the model or the theory. It's all well and good for you and for me, Ron, to sit together and discuss, shall we eat the whole pie? Mm-hmm. We bought a pie and we eat it. And we reflect. But then we have to do another level of reflection called re-reflection. It's necessary to do that because we want to go beyond ourselves to the greater good, to the larger concern of, will this satisfy my wife? Will this be sufficient? I may get home and I may be overweight. I have diabetes. We have to think of the larger consequences of what we do, not just the relationship, but the larger good. So the fourth principle is a creative and new innovative idea that is teachable about the greater good. Mm-hmm. And the final principle, how do we sustain sustainability? So in a nutshell, we have created an extensive curriculum around this, and we're ready to hit the road. So when somebody says Black Lives Matter, we can say we can teach a youngster how to move forward. We can teach how to create the dialogue between ourselves and the other.
Yeah, good.
Doc, with the elements that you brought to the table, those significant pieces that identify what intentional civility or intentional critical civility is, would you also agree that these elements are the key pieces for the to reshape conversations on intentional civility?
Very excellent observation. For us, we think the conversations that have transpired in the social space have been about domination and oppression. And the oppressed has been talking about stop oppressing me, and the oppressor has not participated. So we have these evolution of repetition of violence all over the place. And we think this will allow for a breakthrough in a genuine, legitimate conversation that both parties could participate in.
Would you say that the work that had been done out at Cal State Northridge, how does that connect or apply with the conversations that have been taking place at Crenshaw High School?
You're talking about two areas in which we have worked, Cal State Northridge and among high school kids, in unpacking the model. And they have been enormously helpful because we're not speculating about the power of what we're doing. We've actually tested these in both places with matriculants to the college as well as the high school kids at all levels.
Well, we're going to continue this conversation and bring Danny into this as well, because I think this is really critical, is how this could be a practical approach to dealing with these situations that we're finding ourselves in today. So we're going to take a short break here on Creating Good Work, and we'll be back in just a minute or so. Thank you.
We'll be right back with more Creating Good Work Live.
Open your eyes. Los Angeles is one of the top destination cities for human trafficking. If you see something, say something. Call CAST. Your call remains anonymous. Interpreters available. Human trafficking is all around us. Open your eyes and let them lift theirs.
Every night in America, another kid goes to bed hungry. Every day, another kid falls behind and never catches up. Not because she's not smart, not because he doesn't try hard, but because despite all the wealth in this country, their families can't make ends meet. No matter where you live, there are children in your community who are hungry. Right now, those children need someone they can count on. When you donate to support No Kid Hungry, that can be you. Together, let's make sure that no kid goes hungry.
Welcome back to Creating Good Work Live on T Radio V.
And welcome back. Our guests right now are Dr. Lou King and Daddy Tabor, correct?
Doc, look, I have a question that has been really kind of pushing in my spirit, and that is to have a better understanding how you're able to take the diversity of culture and bring in intentional civility and help them to understand the value of that product, that idea called intentional critical civility. How they benefit. How does the angered benefit?
Yeah, this has occupied my attention for my entire life. How do members from historically oppressed groups, of which I am, deal with the anger so as to work it through to a level of creativity and productivity in society? So for the first time, you're hearing the voices in terms of a model, a voice of a historically oppressed person. And the model is an attempt to do exactly what you're suggesting. Find a way as represented by Nelson Mandela, by Martin Luther King. You know, they say nonviolence, but I want to go beyond nonviolence and show how you can learn the practice of creating out of this feeling of rage and anger. And Martin Luther King, in fact, said that. Where do we go from here? And this is the effort to respond to that.
So let me ask this: how does that relate to angry white people?
Well,
How do you shift that?
This is I want Danny to also come in and be
Yes.
This is really fundamentally the issue. We have to say and develop a voice that would allow us to deal with this. And the thing that has happened to us historically, we have not had an emancipatory voice. We have had a marginalized voice, and we've been continued to abuse. And the way we think we can get a voice is to gain power. And the power that we model is power of the gun. It is going to fail. We have to have an ethical power. We have to have a moral power. And then we have to sort of, out of that power, facilitate and use force, not force in terms of violence, but the power becomes force, the moral force of a moral authority demanding that the other who has otherized us come to the table.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do.
And Daddy?
So in this discussion on intentional critical civility, it comes to mind that we're at a time in our country, if we look at it only in the political prism, that we're faced with a candidate who's chosen to abandon old European traditional civility for in an attempt to energize a segment of the population that has been relegated to the fringe because they don't play well with others. But we've got an administration now, a president and his administration, who've attempted to demonstrate that through being civil, by engaging in dialogue, by not holding to old cliches and old standards, that communication, that by being intentional, by setting in place an act, a policy, a program to address a specific issue, that there is benefit. And so this conversation now excites me because the opportunity for this generation who is comfortable marching and pathologically believes, in this example, Black Lives Matter, now gives them a tool that they can implement to take their voice to the next level, to enact a relationship with their government, with their community, with the business sector that leads to the attainment of specific goals because they're being intentional. They're critically analyzing and developing and strategizing in the process, and they're being civil in it. They're engaging in the dialogue. That's a much different place than just screaming and hollering, wanting to throw bricks and demonstrating for. It puts you in a position to be able to answer the question when someone comes to you and says, well, what do you want? To be able to have an answer.
Right. But is that so that's certainly half of the equation here. But that other side where there are these angry folks who are deaf to, it seems to be deaf to
But it's it still remains the responsibility, I think, of the communicator, the person attempting to communicate, to find the way to get through the anger, to find the message that communicates that it's better we talk and discourse begin, even if we're not beginning in the same place or agreeing on the same context, but that we begin the dialogue and move there, than if we continue to just simply yell at one another and not hear anything and move nowhere.
Excellent. Well, go ahead, Greg.
No, I was saying that's a brilliant point he's making, because what has happened when there is failed dialogue is what you see happening with the terrorism.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, okay, let me go to the next level. And it's producing enormous fear. And we can say, if this is the outcome you choose, this is what was going to happen. Even the sniper showed that he was believing there was no conversation.
Right.
We're saying there is a better way.
Yeah.
All right? And your persistence in supremacy is not the way. Your persistence in keeping your feet on our neck is not the way. You know, you cannot continue to have wars around the world to generate your cheap labor. You cannot.
Right.
You have to begin to dialogue differently.
This is probably a good jump-off point. Intentional critical civility is not simply a highbrow concept of power speaking to power. It's responsible speaking to those you're responsible for. So let's use the parental example. You're in the store. Little Johnny begins to cry. The traditional reaction now in this business is to scream at Johnny, stop crying. Johnny hasn't been addressed, so Johnny cries even more, now begins to act. The power person, the adult in this equation, has the opportunity to engage the response in an intentional, critical way, and can minimize the distraction and address Johnny's concern and still move forward, or can result to sort of the beast response of, I will smack you, Johnny.
Right.
You know. So how do you get to it? So and I agree. It has to be a trained process. It has to be part of the education of the young child. I remember the conversation to my son. You got two little sisters. You can't touch them. You can argue with them. You guys can disagree, and you can scream and yell. But there's no physical presence going to be exchanged here. And when you go out in the community, you can't do it either.
You know, I was really moved by the response in Dallas from the interfaith community, and I want to. If we're queued up to go on this video with the of Reverend Carter and the Imam Suleiman, we have a brief clip here that I think really demonstrates the difference in choices that we can make. And if we could screen that would be great.
Been broken by the recent events that have transpired throughout this entire week, especially these last 24 hours. We have been shaken, and our hearts are heavy with grief. Yes. The scriptures say to us clearly that God is close to the brokenhearted. Yeah. The scriptures convey to us that blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Right. And we refuse to hate each other. Yes. We refuse to point fingers at one another rather than working toward real solutions. Right. Yes. We refuse to allow one event to define who we are as a city and community. Right. Yes. We refuse to not love our brothers and sisters. We refuse not to work together.
It's my privilege to introduce my teacher and friend, the Imam Omar Suleiman.
Last night, as the chaos ensued, myself and my dear friends, Pastor Dr. Michael Waters, regrouped in his church, and we sat together there until a little after 1 a.m. and we reflected with one another, and we prayed with one another for peace. And we almost joked that, is this what it takes for us to have to come together? Does it always have to be a tragedy? Does it always have to be murder? Does it always have to be terrorism? Does it always have to be that hatred forces us to love? Does it always have to be that injustice forces us to call for peace? Can we not come together like this in times other than what we saw last night? We have to stand together today. And I want you to look around, and these cameras might not be able to see it, but I want you to look around and I want you to say, this is the America that we want. This is the America that we want. We don't want an America of racism. We don't want an America of brutality. We don't want an America of terrorism. We don't want an America of fear-mongering. We don't want an America of division. We don't want our hearts to only be forced to come together in a superficial way at times in the face of tragedy. But we want our hearts to constantly remain united so that we can realize a true picture of what we want this country to look like. It doesn't need to be Orlando every time, and it doesn't need to be Dallas again. And we pray that this is not something that we will ever have to come together for again. We pray that the resilience that is shown by our leadership keeps this type of hatred and extremism out. Because we need to stand together today and reaffirm that injustice is not a solution to injustice, that violence is not an appropriate response to violence, that extremism is not an appropriate response to extremism, that hatred is not an appropriate response to hatred, that love and a genuine love and coming together for prayer in times of hardship and in ease is all that can bring us together.
There's more to come on Creating Good Work Live.
Most anti-bullying efforts rely heavily on bystanders to take action, leaving your child with no protection. The No app aims to change that. Now your child can summon the assistance of a policewoman to tell the bully no, and you get alerted in real time with a map of your child's location. With video evidence, the bully's parents can be confronted, and school officials can be forced to take action. You get increased peace of mind, and your child gets increased self-confidence. Sustainable Law Group is a different type of law firm. Our clients are primarily social enterprises, nonprofits, and green businesses. Our mission is to provide legal counsel that is aligned with our clients' values by providing integrated, sustainable, and comprehensive solutions. We're a full-service law firm. Starting a benefit corporation, cooperative, or nonprofit, the attorneys at the Sustainable Law Group are ready to support you in all stages of your business. Find out more about Sustainable Law Group at sustainablelawyer.com.
And now here's Ron and Greg.
And we're back, and welcome to Creating Good Work. We're joined by two more guests for this conversation. First, Debra Petersen, who has worked in higher education for 27 years and has helped countless of students reach their academic and career goals. And after a life-changing trip to West Africa, she was inspired to create a scholarship in honor of her grandmother, and since 1999, the Hazel M. Bryant Memorial Scholarship has been awarded to students of African American descent. And the awardees receive an annual renewable scholarship until they complete their bachelor's or nursing degree, which is wonderful. And Deb's passion now is her College Out Loud program, which promotes positive images and celebrates the achievements of African American students. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you.
And our other guest is DeMonte Thompson, who is a graduate student at USC, Rossier School of Education, working on his master's degree in post-secondary administration and student affairs. He's an emancipated foster youth and brings awareness of the needs of this community from Los Angeles County and beyond. And as a teen, DeMonte wrote a book about this, which kind of details his experience as a foster child, and is planning to write a second book, which is very exciting. He co-founded Break the Boxes, an after-school program for at-risk high school youth that help them find their voices within the arts and education. And he started the Black Male Initiative at CSUN, California State University at Northridge, to address the failing education and retention rates of black males on the campus. And they've helped over 70 members, and now who are holding have developed a reputation for academic excellence. So welcome, DeMonte. Thank you for being part of this.
Let's begin by recapping some of the things that have been stated here earlier. And with that, tell me what captured your attention in the first segment, and what would you like to respond to?
There are so many things that I heard that I could respond to, but I think The reality is, until people feel comfortable with a person or feel some type of connection, they're not going to have an attitude change, in my opinion. So I think we have to find a way to get individuals connected in a way that they find some type of common ground, perhaps outside of ethnicity or quote-unquote race, and go from there. Because oftentimes I've participated in activities and I meet people I never would have connected with otherwise. And so I think people have to change their attitudes and be willing to be open to engaging with people and having a conversation that leads to something positive.
And what about you, Dwight?
Well, something that I took up that was very interesting, it was on the lines of emotional intelligence, and that's how I took it, is that unless those who are striving for a greater change, those who are socially just, if they have a sense of emotional intelligence, are able to strategically come up with a plan of what they would like to accomplish, how they would like to use others in their needs and in their plan to change the system. And then and only then will we be able to make change, positive change, in a better way, instead of going to the routes of using our anger or using confusion. So that's what I took up on.
So I want to introduce another idea, and Dr. Liu, this may include you as well into this conversation, is how we start developing a greater sense of cultural humility.
That's a wonderful thought. But I want to acknowledge what Demante and Debra said. The first principle of intentional critical civility, she articulated beautifully in terms of fostering a relationship where you break the barriers by utilizing empathy. And what you talk about emotional intelligence is really a fundamental problem in Western society, because they have addressed cognitive intelligence, but not emotional. So everything has been driven by materialism and not by a sense of personhood and caring. So when you introduce that new concept, that ties them together.
Mm-hmm.
And you are so right about it. You know, we have done injustice to ourselves by refusing to be human. We have become automatons. And what does it mean to be fundamentally human is the missing link. We have created machines, and we continue to create machines, and people leave retired from their jobs feeling a complete sense of loss. The last 5 or 6 Nobel Peace Prize winners in physics left their role and began to write books on asking the question, I can prove the existence of God.
Right.
Because they were so meaningless in their lives.
Yeah.
So you have to understand, we have created this, you know, and it's not that we haven't done something wonderful by building these long roads and these fast cars and these tall buildings. But there is a missing element.
Yeah. So, Demonte, as a young person hearing this, how do you react to that notion? And also this notion that perhaps of moving back to this idea of cultural humility and the need for some deep listening in our social encounters.
You know what? My experience is a bit different than all young people in America. As a former foster youth, I had a challenge of understanding my history as a black man in America. I had a challenge of understanding what does it mean to have a family, the idea of family, the concept of family and love, and what does that mean. So I feel that many black men that I know that's in my circle, many of us, we struggle with that idea, even though they had a family, even though they were raised by a single parent. So I think it starts with the family. I think it starts once you have the family to say, it's okay to speak Spanish if you want to speak Spanish. It's okay if you want to go and buy a quesadilla. It's okay if you want to speak and talk to these other people. It's okay to be anything that you would like to be because you know who you are. and you are my son, and this is where you come from. So understanding the identity behind why we exist, I didn't understand that until I actually went to college. And that's why I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to go to college, is because scholarships such as the ones that Debbie are facilitating, give people like me the opportunity to find myself, to love myself, and encourage others to love who they are.
It's okay to care.
Yes.
It's okay to love someone. It's okay to be a human being. And that's the message, because in the absence of family, you get constructs that simply bring you through a mechanical system. And the ethical discourse is missing. You get the discourse on all aspects of life, but the one that makes you most beautiful.
If I can add to what DeMonte said, I've found that many students who come from, if you will, dysfunctional families start college and find connections. And I think college is so important because it gives you an opportunity to grow intellectually, spiritually. It teaches you, hopefully, if you take the right classes, how to take care of your physical body. But I saw so many young men connect with other young men, and they would hold each other and help each other. And one young man actually came to me and said, if I hadn't attended we had rap sessions, and he said, I learned what to do when you get stopped by the police. If I didn't know what to do, the outcome might not have been the same. And so I think it's so important, whether it's interacting in society on a level where you know who your family is or you don't know who your family is. When you're in college, you can create that sense of family.
So we only have a minute left,
Right.
so please.
I want to both react and ask a question. So in this experience of utilizing, encompassing, engaging in intentional critical civility, my sense is that it's actually beyond okay. It's right to do it. It's right to. I used to suggest to people that you want to be multilingual. You want to be multicultural. You want to understand the other individual, not from the prism where you stand, but from the prism they're standing in. And in order to do that, you need that sort of, as you defined it, that emotional intelligence that allows you to be okay with who you are, so that you can acknowledge, not accept, but acknowledge where they are. And that's going to be a critical part and component of how this gets rolled out and how we utilize intentional critical civility in the community setting.
Well, I love this conversation. We have we have to take a break here, and we're going to come back, and we'll come back to this point, and so that we can finish with this material. So, again, you're listening to Creating Good Work. We're happy you're here, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Arizona State University, where I am a change leader and I'm the director of social embeddedness. So part of my role as a change leader, as that liaison between Ashoka and the institution, is making sure that we have a chance to learn from the other institutions, and I can then help take those best practices from other universities and share them with my colleagues here at ASU, and also share what we're doing here at ASU that we're proud of, and then help put that out to the Changemaker campuses. So that role of liaison and connector, I think, are very important aspects of being a change leader. As the number of institutions in the Changemaker Campus Consortium continue to grow, my hope is that we will at some point reach a critical mass where we are not a small consortium in a sea of institutions, but instead we are the norm in higher education, which is that most institutions are committed to this type of change-making effort and realize that it's time to shake things up in higher ed.
Surviving an assault is never easy, and the questions which flow only add to the trauma. Most victims are not ready to talk right away. With I've Been Violated app, survivors can confidentially record their story simply by talking into their phone. The record they create is doubly encrypted and stored securely offline, accessible only through the proper authorities. The I've Been Violated app helps prove survivors' credibility when they are ready to seek the help they need.
We're back with Ron and Greg.
I want to return to where we left off, and go back to you, Danny, and talk to you about this point around humans helping humans. This isn't just an issue of racial justice, a racial issue, but it's really a human issue. And I'd love you to kind of complete that thought.
It's let me sort of bring focus here. When we say, and I'm part of this effort to help young people, particularly young black men, understand how to communicate to law enforcement when they come into contact with law enforcement. But in the context of intentional critical civility, it's really about teaching the human how to communicate with the human, irrespective of role. That if you value the human, you, then you've got to value the human, they, and begins that process. And once you get to that point, then being civil is a natural reaction to the process.
Yeah, perfect.
Engage. Having empathy becomes natural because you see yourself in the other person. So you're trying to find a way to communicate. You begin with, how can I help you, and mean it, as opposed to just saying it and espousing it.
Correct.
What are some of the thoughts that you're hearing by your cohorts on campuses? What's the dialogue that's taking place culturally amongst those that you're close with, those that you don't know but hear dialogues in the classroom, those students who are coming to you to find out, to express their concerns with you and your role, and you with your colleagues? Why don't you begin and respond to that?
What I've tried to do, and my colleagues as well, is to provide a safe place for especially black men to talk about their emotions. And I think it's critical because society paints them as criminals. You watch the news, and 60% of the reports about black men in the news are about them being criminals or athletes. And so a lot of times students will come to me and say, my teacher got upset in class because I went to the restroom and she said it startled her. And so what does that mean? I mean, it's things like that. And that's a very simple thing to have to step out of class. And, students find that I have to raise my hand like I'm in middle school. And so I think it's really important to provide a safe space where not just black men, but black women also can come and just talk about what they've dealt with or how they feel.
Yeah. Devontae?
You know what? There's a lot of, not conflict, but cognitive dissonance that I observe that's going on around the people that I speak with. In the classroom, sometimes I feel that academic freedom is something that the professors are not valuing. Some things are going on in the on the outside of the college walls, and they don't bring it up. Me being one of the only black men in the cohort, sometimes when we speak about race, everyone looks back and says, tell us about all black men, and that's something that I can't do, and I won't do. But what I do acknowledge is that it's a hard conversation to have, even in the amongst black people, because some are Black Lives Matter, some are let's go on a freeway, some are we need to retaliate, and some are no, don't do anything at all. So there's so many things to do, and for me, I'm really trying to get a hand on what it is I believe in as a Christian man, as a man of faith, as a former emancipated foster youth. Like, how does all of this come into context of who I am? And how can I support other black men that look like me without hurting someone else?
Yeah. How are you able to encourage them to move beyond their challenges?
I think the education and mentorship is the number one answer. There are many people who seek for a male relationship but don't know how to say it, even in our peer group. For me, I was reading the bio of Dr. King here, sitting here, and I said, that's a man that I need to speak with. And I don't think many black men are doing their research and reaching out to others who they admire, because there's a sense of, I can do it myself. Machismo, I don't know if you call it that, or, thinking too much of oneself. But we have to get to a point where, we are humble enough to ask for help. We're humble enough to notice our weaknesses. And once I was able to notice that, wow, I failed, and I failed good. I failed in a good way because I learned what not to do that time. And I learned from all the failures of all the black men that ever lived in that was ever a part of my life, my father. And I said, that's not what I'm going to do. So we have to move on beyond that.
So this is a question for all of you, and all of you can take it. What message is this generation getting about the future?
Unfortunately, Demante is on target again, brilliantly spoken a few minutes ago. We have had no role models outside the narrow limits of athletics to instruct and inform us, and it has constrained the development of the black community. But I think the conversation is also undermined by the fact that while we are talking about the black person and black lives, what's hidden in the shadows is that the white man and the white lives are in a miserable condition. And nobody deals with that. And there is the bitterness because they are trying to say it without saying it. And it generates more and more bitterness, and it's a conversation that needs to be had. Their own poverty of development has been further corrupted by this massified mechanistic universe, this materialism. Mm-hmm. They've gone nowhere. They have not developed. The human agenda has failed to be engendered anywhere. So it's not just the black men. We are screaming about it, but the only models we have for moving forward are all false, destructive, and undermining. And so we are stuck. Yeah. And that is what the source of the pain is, the major pain.
I'm a father, and I say to people that I'm a father in training. But listening to Demonte, I'm reminded I've got a 22-year-old daughter who this morning asked me to read 2 paragraphs. They were the mission statement for the company she wants to start to serve the young people that are coming behind her, utilizing role models that have inspired her towards her own success. Now, this is a 22-year-old who I'm proud to say is my daughter, but I clearly spend more hours frustrated by not understanding where she's going and what she's trying to do than I do saying I'm inspired by how I've raised her, only to be again today excited and enlightened by the depth by which she has been able to put in writing not only what she wants to accomplish on behalf of other people, but how she wants to use models of success. The people who have, from her teacher in her culinary program to a relative, happens to be Robert Moses, who's part of American history, to a young man who's just recently come from incarceration and started a counseling group, to music and I mean, she's conceptualized this in a way that grabs parts of our community that we don't think need to be engaged and interacted, to say this can help a young person. This is, I can spend some time and talked about the amount of time. So I'm excited that they see the white supremacists hiding in the shadow. They see that, but they're not blinded by the opportunity that this form of freedom we have allows them if they move, and that's exciting. Yeah. That's exciting.
We've got just a really brief time, so Demonte, I'd love to hear your response, but really short. quick.
Response, can you rephrase the question, please?
Well, I want to hear what the message is this generation is getting about the future.
Oh, wow. I see no answers. I see a lot of conflict. I don't see people coming together and saying this is what's going to happen in 10 years. Even for the president to even acknowledge and have a plan that these are some of the reforms, or this is how we're going to mitigate the bias. How do we do that? So I don't see an actionable response. I think it starts in the mind. I think it starts in the family, at the home. So. If it starts there, then I'll see a change, hopefully. But if it doesn't start there, I don't think it's a possibility.
Right. And I would like to see a last statement from all of our guests.
Well, I don't even know if we have time for that. Oh, well, maybe we do.
Hey,
very
now.
Quickly.
We're beginning with you, Debra.
Family is everything. And within the black community, we have to get back to our true sense of family. It's the most important thing. There are a few musicians in LA, up and coming, some famous around the world. And what I realized was their fathers were there. And what I love seeing in DeMonte is that he is going to do what he needs to do for his children in spite of what he didn't get when he was growing up. So I applaud you.
Thank you.
Briefly.
That we not leave it to DeMonte's generation to figure it out, that those of us are still here provide some pathways and some steps for them to stand on to help solve the problem and to be part of the solution and not just the part of the history of the problem.
Excellent.
And Doc?
Do not let DeMonte fail. Do not let DeMonte fail. Let's do everything for a person like him representing that new generation.
Right. So I really thank you all for being here today. And for more information about this, you can contact contact us at info@cgwmedia.com, and please do so if you're interested. This is a real important topic. Our time it's amazing how fast this goes. But again, let me thank our guests today, Dr. Lou, of course, Dr. Lou King, Danny Tabor, DeMonte Thompson, and Deb. Thank you all for being here today. This has been great. This has been a great discussion. I hope we can continue more of these discussions as we move forward.
So
even I have a failure of my own emancipation consciousness. Instead of saying we must ensure the man's success, I said, do not let him fail. You see, that's the struggle we have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, we'll leave that as
I leave with one last name,
please.
not fully stated, Debbie Petersen.
Oh, Debbie Petersen. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
So again, thank you, and thank you for tuning in to Creating Good Work. We are glad you could be here with us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks a lot.
Hey, all right.
Creating Good Work Live is a production of the Social Action Media Network on T Radio V.
You are watching T Radio V. Radio